2.
Now, there's no denying that ADHD does exist and does affect many people on a level I can't understand. But I've heard the words, I have ADHD so many times, I've almost started to undermine the disorder entirely. And that seems kind of wrong. And I think the leading cause of that is because ADHD is overdiagnosed in America. Now today I'll be going over what ADHD is, how often it is diagnosed, and what doctors say are reasons behind it, and what other disorders can be diagnosed other than ADHD. Now, according to psychiatric.org, ADHD is the most common diagnosed disorder in America, especially in teens. Now, symptoms can include making careless mistakes, inability to pay attention, fidgeting and squirming too much, talking too much, and also the inability to do sustained mental tasks. Now, my problem with these is that it almost seems like everyone can have at least maybe all of these, but you probably don't have ADHD. These symptoms aren't really well defined and very blanketed to a lot of people. For kids, one of the leading causes for being diagnosed is just they're always on the go, which is pretty much most kids, under 5, even 6-year-olds. So even though you might relate to a lot of these symptoms, you probably don't have ADHD. But how often is it diagnosed? Now, according to a study in Harvard, the upper realistic limit for kids that actually have it is only 5%. But there's a lot of conflicting data out there. On the Anxiety Disorder Association of America, they say up to 60% of kids can have ADHD. Now, that's a 169% difference, but yet most believe that the 5% is more accurate. And also in adults, Harvard says only 2.5% of adults have it. But on the ADAA Association, they say 4% have it, which is a 46% difference. Now, that's a lot. How can you have such conflicting data? And that's one of the problems. Even though most people do agree on the 5% and 2.5%, as long as we don't come to a census, there's not going to be really any stopping it. Now, what do doctors and psychiatrists say could be some of the reasons? Well, a big part of the reason could just be lying about your symptoms. Because the medicines that are prescribed for this, such as Adderall, are very common recreational use for fun, just to feel that kind of, you can get addicted to it as well. But also, it could just be parents just want to make their kids more manageable. Maybe they're having a tough time working out school and their work and their kids, so you give them something to calm them down. But also another factor could just be school in general. You can't expect kids to sit in a seat for 8 hours a day and not want to move around and be active. And so there needs to be a change. And what that is, I don't know what that could be. But another thing is ADHD is often misdiagnosed because a lot of the symptoms do overlap to other disorders, such as anxiety, autism, or bipolar disorder, and it could just be nothing. It could just be that person's personality. Maybe they are a little more on the go, but that doesn't mean they have ADHD. So maybe it's time. Now, bipolar disorder is complicated, just like any disorder. So yet they don't know much about it. But they need to understand that it kind of needs to be a little more defined in how it's diagnosed. Because the most common way to diagnose it is just to talk about it. You just go to your doctor and you give them a list of symptoms, and they can choose what you have. There's not really any test or any defined way of diagnosis. So today we talked about what ADHD is. We also talked about how often it is prescribed and what doctors say are the reasons behind it. We also talked about the misdiagnosis of it. So next time you hear someone say, I have ADHD, maybe don't shy away from it, but maybe kind of question a little bit to whether it is real or not. Thank you.